Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into how the Bahá'í Faith views gender equality. And especially since you mentioned wanting to learn about how some of their ideas were ahead of their time, we're going to be looking at excerpts from a text called Incredible Baha'i Teachings on Gender Equality, Ahead of Their Time. And believe me, the title is no exaggeration. We are talking mid-1800s Persia. So some of these ideas were pretty revolutionary for their era.
I'm ready to be impressed. The 19th century wasn't exactly known for its progressive stance on gender roles.
Exactly. So the first thing that jumps out from this text is this idea of inherent spiritual equality between men and women. It's presented as like a core belief not open to debate. Baha'u'llah, the founder of the faith, stated that women and men have been and will always be equal in the sight of God.
That's a pretty bold statement for that time period, considering the cultural context. To understand the impact, you have to remember that 19th century Persia was a society deeply rooted in traditional norms that often placed women in a subordinate position.
It's like they were laying the groundwork for a totally different way of seeing the world. And it goes deeper than just saying men and women are equal. The text emphasizes that in the Bahá'í view, the soul itself has no gender. They believe spiritual qualities like love, compassion, courage, aren't tied to whether you're male or female. They're inherent to our souls.
That's interesting, because it completely removes any basis for claiming one gender is inherently superior to the other. It's like saying the very essence of a human being transcends these categories we've created.
It definitely challenges the assumptions a lot of people had back then.
Yeah.
And honestly, some people still hold on to today. But the Baha'i teachings don't stop at spiritual equality. They also give very practical guidance on how to make equality a reality. One of the biggest things they emphasize is
education. I'd wager that's a key factor in any movement towards equality.
You nailed it. And the text doesn't just say education is important for everyone. It makes a much bolder claim. There's this incredible quote from Abdu'l-Baha, Baha'u'llah's son, where he says, "The education of women is of greater importance than the education of men, for they are the mothers of the race, and mothers rear the children." Even today, that's a statement that would raise eyebrows in some circles.
It really shows how far ahead of their time they were in the 1800s, when formal education for women was often limited or considered unnecessary, to not only advocate for it, but to claim it's more important than men's education. That's a radical notion.
It makes you wonder how different the world might be today if we had truly embraced that idea back then and fully invested in the power of educating girls and women. Makes you think, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it highlights how even the most progressive ideas can take generations to be fully realized in society. But let's shift gears a bit and look at another fascinating concept that the Baha'i writings bring up. They talk about this idea of humanity being like a bird with two wings, men and women.
Yes. The famous two wings of humanity metaphor. It's so simple, but so powerful. What's the significance of this metaphor within the Baha'i teachings?
It's about much more than just saying men and women are equal. It's about understanding that humanity needs both genders to truly thrive and progress. Just like a bird can't fly with only one wing, society can't reach its full potential unless both men and women are empowered to contribute their talents and perspectives.
So it's not just about being allowed to participate. It's about being actively encouraged and empowered to do so in all areas of life, right?
Exactly. It's about creating a society where women's voices are heard, their contributions are valued, and their leadership is welcomed in every field, from science and politics to the arts and business. It's about recognizing that diversity of thought and experience leads to better outcomes for everyone.
I love how this metaphor pushes us to think beyond just basic equality and challenges us to envision what true partnership could look like. It's a high bar to set, but it's also incredibly inspiring. What comes to mind for you when you think about areas where we might still be working towards this ideal of full participation for women?
That's a great question. And there are definitely areas where we still have a long way to go. But before we dive too deep into that, there's another connection the text makes that I find fascinating. The link between gender equality and world peace.
This is where it gets really interesting, right? First glance, you might not see the connection. How do the Baha'i writings tie these two seemingly separate concepts together?
It has to do with their view of how humanity is evolving. The text argues that the old world order was largely built on force and dominance, which were often associated with traditionally masculine traits. But they believe we're moving towards an era where qualities like cooperation, nurturing, and service will be essential for creating a more peaceful and just world.
And they see these qualities as being more closely aligned with what were traditionally considered feminine attributes, right? So it's not about saying one set of qualities is better than the other, but recognizing that we need a balance of both to build a better future.
Exactly. They even predict that a more peaceful future will be less masculine and more permeated with feminine ideals. Now, that doesn't mean men will be excluded or their contributions will be devalued. It's about shifting the emphasis away from power dynamics based on dominance and control towards models of leadership based on collaboration and mutual respect.
It's a really thought-provoking idea. And it makes you wonder if there's truly a correlation between greater gender equality and a reduction in conflict. It's definitely something to ponder. It's definitely a big shift in thinking. But let's bring this back to a more personal level for a moment. When we talk about gender roles, especially within families, it's easy to assume that a faith founded in the 1800s might have some pretty traditional views. Did the Baha'i teachings challenge those norms too?
You'd be surprised. While the Bahá'í Faith doesn't dismiss the importance of motherhood, it definitely doesn't see it as the only path for women. It's more about recognizing the unique qualities of both genders and how they complement each other, in fact. There's a quote from Baha'u'llah in the text where he says, "Verily, God created women for men and men for women."
It does sound a bit traditional on the surface.
Yeah.
How does the Baha'i perspective interpret that quote?
It's all about partnership, not hierarchy. The Baha'i teachings emphasize that men and women were created for each other, not to dominate or control one another. It's about seeing the inherent value in both genders and recognizing that they bring different strengths and perspectives to the table.
So it's not about erasing those differences, but valuing them and seeing how they can work together to create something stronger and more beautiful.
Exactly. The Baha'i Faith views men and women as being equal in their worth, but possessing distinct qualities that complement each other. It's not about saying one is better or worse, just different. And those differences, when embraced and respected, actually enrich the relationship between them.
It sounds like they're advocating for a more nuanced view of gender roles, one that allows for individual choice and recognizes the potential for both men and women to contribute in meaningful ways beyond traditional expectations.
That's a great way to put it. It's about expanding the possibilities for everyone, not limiting people based on preconceived notions of what they should be doing.
So it all circles back to that idea of full participation we were discussing earlier, breaking down the boxes and saying, hey, maybe a woman is a gifted scientist, or a man might be an amazing stay-at-home dad. It's about opening up those possibilities and allowing individuals to find their own path.
Precisely. And that's what's so revolutionary about these teachings, especially for the time period in which they emerged. They challenged the prevailing social structures that often confine people to rigid gender roles and limited their potential.
It's amazing how, even back in the 1800s, they were already promoting these ideas that many societies are still grappling with today. But ideas are only as good as their implementation. Did the Baha'i community actually put these principles into action?
That's the key question, isn't it? It's easy to talk about lofty ideals, but much harder to live them out in practice.
So did they walk the walk? What does the text tell us?
It seems they did. The text highlights that the Baha'i community has been actively working to integrate these principles of gender equality into its structure and functioning from the very beginning.
Give us some examples. What does that look like in real life?
Well, one of the things the text mentions is that women have always held positions of leadership and authority within the Baha'i community. They're not just relegated to roles traditionally associated with women. They serve at all levels of their administration.
That's impressive. It shows they're not just paying lip service to these ideas, but actually creating a system where women have a voice and can participate in decision-making at every level.
And it goes beyond just internal structures. The Baha'i community is also known for actively advocating for gender equality in the wider world.
Can you elaborate on that? What kinds of initiatives do they support?
They're involved in a range of efforts, from promoting education for girls and women to working on projects that empower women economically and help to eliminate violence against women.
It's inspiring to see a community not just living out these principles internally, but also actively working to make a difference on a broader scale.
Yeah.
It really highlights the power of putting beliefs into action. And it really shows how deeply these principles are woven into the fabric of the Baha'i faith. It's not just a theoretical concept for them. It's a way of life.
Yeah, and it's a testament to how powerful these ideas can be when they're put into practice. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Baha'i teachings on gender equality, it's clear that they were indeed ahead of their time.
Absolutely. We've covered so much ground today. From the fundamental belief in the spiritual equality of men and women to the importance of education, the power of the two wings of humanity metaphor, and even the connection between gender equality and world peace. It's a lot to take in, but it's also incredibly inspiring.
What's striking is how interconnected all these ideas are. They're not just isolated concepts. They build upon each other to create a comprehensive vision of what a truly just and equitable society could look like.
And they leave us with some big questions to ponder, like, what if these principles were more widely embraced? How would the world be different today if we had truly committed to achieving gender equality in all aspects of life?
It's a fascinating thought experiment. Imagine a world where men and women collaborated as true partners, where leadership was based on service and cooperation, and where everyone felt empowered to contribute their unique talents and perspectives. What kind of social changes might be possible in a world like that?
It's almost like opening a door to a whole new set of possibilities, and maybe, just maybe, it brings us a little closer to that vision of lasting peace that the Baha'i writings speak about.
It's a vision worth striving for, and the Baha'i teachings offer a roadmap for how we might get there.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about, and I hope it sparks some curiosity for you too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Baha'i teachings on gender equality. Until next time, keep those minds open and those conversations flowing.